He raised his hand to correct a lie and got slapped by the sheriff. But then a U.S. official walked in clapping. You ever seen a school gym so packed it felt like the walls were breathing? That's how it was that Friday morning at Lincoln High in Pine Ridge, Georgia. A town so small, most folks still left their doors unlocked and knew the mailman's birthday. The whole community turned out for what was supposed to be a wholesome moment. The annual Heroes Day assembly, meant to honor local police, firefighters, EMTs, and a handful of standout students. A harmless event, in theory. Parents fanned themselves in folding chairs. Teachers buzzed around the bleachers, herding kids and straightening neckties. The air smelled like floor polish, cologne, and cafeteria cinnamon rolls. You could hear the murmur of 1,000 side conversations bouncing off the walls. 15-year-old Jalen McCoy stood near the front row with his hands clasped, rocking on the balls of his feet. He had on a pressed button-up shirt, khakis that still had a tag mark from the store, and a fresh haircut that cost his uncle $40 and a long wait at Earl's barbershop. He wasn't nervous, not exactly, just alert. Jalen wasn't the kind of kid who looked for trouble. In fact, he went out of his way to avoid it. Straight-A student, debate team, chess captain, the kind of kid teachers called a pleasure to have in class. But that morning, something was off. His mom, Charlene, had squeezed his hand tighter than usual when she dropped him off. She didn't say why, but he felt it. That twitch in her voice, the weight behind her, "Be careful, baby." He shrugged it off. What could go wrong at a school assembly? Near the podium, the high school principal, Mr. Denton, tapped the mic and winced as it squealed. "Thank you all for coming," he started, smiling nervously. "We're honored today to recognize not just our amazing students, but also the brave individuals who keep Pine Ridge safe. Please welcome Sheriff Wade Turlington." A polite round of applause followed. Some parents stood. A few students clapped harder than others, mostly the ones who knew their folks worked down at the sheriff's office. And then he stepped out. Wade Turlington was a man you noticed. Broad-shouldered, buzz-cut, mirrored sunglasses, and boots that clomped like they belonged in a Western. He walked with the kind of swagger only men in power carried. A mix of confidence and something else. Something heavier. "Thank you," he said into the mic, removing his shades. "When I was invited here, I knew I had to clear my calendar. Because this right here, is the future of our town. Y'all are the next generation of leaders. But leadership starts with discipline, respect, knowing your place, and earning your way up." Some heads nodded, some parents looked proud, but a few faces, especially among the teachers, twitched, barely. Turlington continued, "Now, back in my day, we were taught to stand when elders walked in. We didn't talk back, and we sure didn't rewrite history to make ourselves feel better." That last line landed hard. He smirked like he'd dropped a punchline. Jalen's brows furrowed. "Some folks today," Turlington went on, "want to pretend the country's full of villains, that law enforcement is always wrong, that slavery built the country, not hard work." Jalen's jaw moved before his brain could stop it. He raised his hand. Just like that. One hand. Calm, respectful. But the gym went quiet, and that's when everything started to shift. But what Sheriff Turlington did next, no one saw coming. "Excuse me, sir." Jalen's voice was steady, not loud, not rude, just clear. Some students turned. A few adults glanced at one another. One teacher in the corner stiffened. Ms. Burney, the U.S. history teacher who'd coached Jalen for the state history bowl. She knew that tone in his voice. Calm, correct, careful. Sheriff Turlington paused mid-sentence and looked down at him like he'd just spotted a roach on his boot. "Something you want to say, son?" Jalen nodded. "Yes, sir. With respect, what you said about slavery, that it wasn't what built the country, that's not accurate. There's documented evidence from economists, historians. Slavery didn't just exist. It was foundational to the economy, especially in the South. And to say otherwise..." Turlington cut him off. His voice dropped low and slow. "Boy, I don't think anybody asked for a lecture." The air turned thick. Ms. Burney took a step forward, opened her mouth, then stopped. Everyone waited for someone else to say something, but no one did. "I'm not lecturing," Jalen replied, softer now. I just think it's important to be—" "You think?" Turlington scoffed. "Well, there's your first mistake. You don't get to think in here when grown folks are talking." Laughter, nervous and uncomfortable, rippled through a corner of the room. Jalen's eyes dropped to the floor. He could feel his cheeks burning, but he didn't sit down. "I'm not trying to be disrespectful," he said again slowly. I care about truth. And if we're talking about leadership, then we should start with honesty, that's all." Then came the silence. Not just quiet, but the kind where you could hear a bottle cap drop on the far side of the gym. Turlington stepped down from the podium. 1, 2, 3 steps. And now he was in front of Jalen, standing so close the boy had to lean his head back just to look up. The sheriff's boots squeaked against the polished gym floor. His lip curled into a smirk, but there was no humor in it. "You care about truth?" he repeated. "You sure you're not just trying to be a smart mouth?" "No, sir." "You calling me a liar?" "No, sir. I'm saying what you said wasn't accurate." Crack. The sound of the slap echoed like a gunshot. Open palm, right across Jalen's left cheek. He didn't fall, but he stumbled. His glasses flew sideways, one lens popping loose. He caught himself on the edge of the bleacher. His mouth stayed open, like the words had been knocked out of it. Gasps. Not the kind from movies. The real kind. Sharp, scattered, and loud. A second later, phones were in the air. You could hear recording apps opening. A mother whispered, "Did he just—" Someone said, "Oh my God." Someone else started crying. Sheriff Turlington stood still. He looked satisfied, like he'd just demonstrated a lesson no book could teach. He turned back toward the mic, brushing off his hands like he'd finished yard work. Then a voice from the back boomed louder than any speaker in the room. Clap, clap, clap. 3 slow claps, then more. People turned. Even the sheriff froze. And that's when she walked in. You know that moment when everything just stops? Like the world forgets to breathe? That's what it felt like when the double doors at the back of the gym creaked open and Angela Brookshear walked in. Tall, broad shoulders, hair in a tight bun, dark green uniform, crisp like it had just come off the hanger. The silver stars on her chest caught the gym lights, and right behind her, 2 plainclothes security officers flanked her like shadows. She didn't smile, she didn't speak, she just kept clapping, slow, measured, loud. The sound of it, echoing off the walls like thunder, was surgical. Each clap sharper than the last. Deliberate, cutting through the whispers, through the shock, through Sheriff Turlington's ego. His face went pale. The secretary kept walking until she reached the front row, where Jalen was still standing, eyes wide, lip trembling, but held tight. He hadn't moved. He hadn't cried. But his hands shook just enough to betray the fire building inside him. Secretary Brookshear looked at him, then at the sheriff. Then, without looking at the crowd, she raised the mic. "Now that," she said, calm as ice, "is exactly why I came here today." You could have heard a pin drop. Turlington squinted. "I wasn't informed you'd be here," he said, trying to recover his footing. "Clearly," she replied. She turned to the audience. Parents, students, teachers, administrators. Some were already live streaming. Others just stared, frozen. "My name is Angela Brookshear, Secretary of Defense. Born and raised 6 blocks from here. Lincoln High graduate, class of '92. Bronze Star, 2 deployments. And more years than I care to count cleaning up the messes men like you leave behind." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. Turlington shifted uncomfortably. "Now hold on." She held up a hand. That shut him down quick. "I came here to speak about leadership, about courage, about what it means to serve a country where not every child gets the same protection under the law, even in a school gym. And I was going to tell these kids that sometimes you have to speak up, even when it's dangerous. But I don't have to tell them anymore." Her eyes met Jalen's again. Because one of them just did. Murmurs of agreement grew into claps. Not slow this time, real ones. Scattered applause that picked up fast. Some parents stood. Teachers nodded. Turlington started backing toward the podium, jaw tight, eyes darting for the principal. "You people have no idea what kind of disrespect we deal with. You just slapped a child," Brookshear interrupted, "on video, in a public school, for telling the truth." She turned to the principal. "Mr. Denton, I hope you understand the gravity of what just happened here, because the Department of Defense does, and so does the Department of Justice. Denton looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. We will be reviewing the incident immediately. This is a misunderstanding. Brookshear didn't blink. There's no misunderstanding when the cameras are rolling. She stepped down from the stage and walked toward Jalen. You all right? She asked. He nodded, though barely. She took a handkerchief from her pocket, handed it to him. You don't ever let someone silence you for telling the truth. That's how empires fall. He swallowed hard. Yes, ma'am. Then she leaned closer and whispered, You handled that better than most grown men I know. Jalen smiled, just barely. His mom, now standing in the crowd with tears in her eyes, clutched her chest. Sheriff Turlington tried to slink off stage, but the security detail wasn't having it. One officer stepped in front of him, the other stayed by the exit. And just like that, the man who slapped a kid in front of hundreds now had nowhere to go. But what happened after the camera stopped rolling? That's where things really got messy. The video hit the internet before the gym even emptied. A sophomore named Tariq, known for live streaming everything from cafeteria food fights to hallway dance battles, had caught the entire scene on his phone. Clean angle, steady hand, full audio. 10 minutes after the slap, it was on TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, and somebody's cousin's group chat in Tallahassee. By the time Jalen got home that afternoon, the clip had over 2.3 million views. Sheriff Wade Turlington was trending, but not in the way he liked. News vans showed up before sundown. CNN, MSNBC, even a local Fox affiliate, trying to get both sides. Reporters knocked on doors. A woman from NPR tried to interview the lunch lady. Kids at Lincoln High were getting DM'd by strangers asking for interviews. Jalen's face was everywhere. And while half the country was calling him brave, the other half wasn't. That night, his family shut off the porch light and took turns watching the windows. Not because they were paranoid, but because someone had already driven by the house yelling slurs. Another person threw a crumpled Confederate flag onto their lawn. Charlene called the police. They took 3 hours to arrive. When they finally did, the responding officer, who'd played high school football with Sheriff Turlington, told them, We're doing the best we can. Jalen looked at his mom. Her face was calm, but her hands were shaking. She made him sleep in her room that night, just in case. Meanwhile, the school board scrambled to save face. An emergency meeting was called. The superintendent gave a statement that felt like it had been written by a lawyer and a sleep-deprived intern. We regret the incident that occurred on school grounds and are committed to a full investigation. That's all they said. No mention of names, no accountability, just the incident. But inside the school, things were anything but quiet. Teachers whispered in break rooms. Some were scared to speak up, others weren't. Ms. Burney wore a Black Lives Matter pin to class the next day and dared the principal to tell her something. One of the gym coaches, a former cop, loudly defended Turlington in the teacher's lounge and ended up yelling at the janitor, who had just said, "Man hit a kid, ain't nothing to defend." At lunch, students argued. Some thought Jalen was a hero. Others said he was just trying to make it about race. A junior girl in the front office posted, "He shouldn't have mouthed off. Don't care who he is." Her post got screenshotted, reposted, and ratioed into next week. Even some parents split down the middle. In the Pine Ridge Moms of Facebook group, the comment section was a battleground. Miss Denise, who ran the local bake sale, said, "That boy was disrespected, plain and simple." Another mom replied, "I was raised to never interrupt adults. Respect goes both ways." 10 comments later, someone brought up Colin Kaepernick, and the whole thread went nuclear. Meanwhile, Secretary Brookshear didn't disappear. She held a press conference right on the school steps 2 days later. "I won't be sugarcoating anything," she said. "A grown man assaulted a student for correcting a historical lie. That's not discipline, that's abuse." Reporters shouted questions. "Are you calling for the sheriff to resign?" "I'm calling for accountability, real accountability. Not silence, not excuses, and definitely not threats." She didn't flinch once. That same afternoon, the sheriff's office released a statement of its own. Turlington didn't apologize. He said he regretted the situation escalated and insisted he acted on instinct to maintain order. Instinct. Like a child was an enemy combatant. But inside Jalen's house, it wasn't just the internet they were worried about anymore. It was what might happen next, in their own town. By Monday morning, Pine Ridge felt like it had been split down the middle with a dull axe. You had the folks who said, "That boy's a hero, he stood up for what's right." Then you had the folks who muttered, "He should have stayed in his place." The lines weren't always clean. Black, white, young, old. Some people surprised you. Some people didn't. At Earl's barbershop, where news traveled faster than the mail, the mood was tense. Earl stood at his chair, arms crossed, listening to Big Reggie go off, while a teen waited in the chair with a smock over his chest. "I'm telling you," Reggie said, voice rising, "if that had been my nephew, I'd be in a holding cell right now." Earl looked up. "Then what?" Reggie paused. "Then at least that sheriff would know what it feels like to be scared." The old men nodded, but one guy in the corner, Mr. Landry, retired Army, lived in Pine Ridge for 50 years, shook his head. "Anger don't fix anything. What fixes it is not letting them get away with it. Use your head, not your fists." Back across town, at Mason's Coffee and Copy, it was a different kind of conversation. More polite, less direct. A group of church moms sat with scones and folded hands, whispering. "I just think we don't know the whole story," said one. "Boys today are mouthy." Another woman leaned in. "But he's a child. That sheriff hit a child." Well, maybe the boy felt too comfortable talking back. No one said it out loud, but the way they said "boy" told you exactly how they felt. The mayor held a town hall that night. It was packed. People spilled into the aisles, out the door, onto the steps. Every news crew within 200 miles had cameras rolling. "I understand this community is hurting," said Mayor Hollings, sweat shining on his forehead. "I've known Sheriff Turlington 20 years. He's a good man. This is a complex situation." That's when Charlene McCoy stood up in the third row. No microphone, no permission, just fire in her voice. "Tell me what's complex about a grown man slapping my child." The room fell quiet. "I sent my son to school to be educated, not assaulted, not embarrassed, not made into a headline. So you can keep your complex. I want accountability." People started clapping. Others stared at the floor. And in the back row, Sheriff Turlington sat with his arms folded and jaw tight. He didn't say a word. Back at school, Jalen tried to keep his head down, but that was impossible now. He couldn't walk 10 steps without someone patting him on the back, whispering, "Yo, that was brave," or asking, "You scared?" or "What's next?" He didn't have answers. He didn't want to be a symbol. He just wanted to pass geometry and eat his sandwich in peace. But at lunch, he sat across from Dante, one of the few kids who'd always been honest with him. "You know you messed up their little fantasy, right?" Dante said, pulling a juice box from his bag. "What fantasy?" "That this school, this town, this whole setup, that it's fair. You stood up and said, 'Hey, this ain't right,' and that scared them more than anything." Jalen nodded slowly. "I didn't mean to make trouble." Dante shrugged. "Trouble usually means you're doing something right." That night, Jalen couldn't sleep, not because of fear. He'd already faced that. But because for the first time he realized something bigger was happening. His name was in articles next to words like civil rights, youth activism, accountability. He was 15. He just wanted to tell the truth, but the truth had a way of making people very, very uncomfortable. The sheriff's office tried to act like it was business as usual. Turlington even showed up for work on Tuesday, walking into the station with his coffee like he hadn't slapped a teenager in front of 500 witnesses. But folks weren't buying it. 3 deputies called out sick. One quietly handed in a resignation letter. The county commissioner scheduled a closed-door meeting to evaluate leadership. Meanwhile, parents called the school board nonstop. Some threatened to pull their kids out of Lincoln High. Others demanded the sheriff be arrested. But the truth? Arresting a sheriff in a small southern town isn't easy. He was the system. That's when Angela Brookshear showed up again, this time at City Hall. No press, no podium, just her and her legal team. She met with the mayor and 3 city attorneys behind locked doors. No one knows exactly what she said, but by Thursday morning, a statement was released. Sheriff Wade Turlington is on unpaid administrative leave pending investigation. He still hadn't apologized, didn't even release a video, just vanished. Rumors spread fast. He'd lawyered up. He blamed the liberal mob. Someone claimed they saw him at a bar muttering about how the town had turned on him. But the attention didn't die down. If anything, it grew. Jalen got letters from people he'd never met, from Seattle, from Detroit, even from a retired teacher in Kansas who said, "You reminded me of why I started teaching." Some messages were ugly, sure, but most were filled with respect, encouragement, hope. Still, Jalen stayed quiet, until the town forum. It was held in the same gym where the slap happened. This time, the bleachers were packed again, but for a different reason. The school board invited members of the public to speak. Jalen didn't plan to talk, but when his name was called and every eye turned to him, he stood, walked slowly to the mic, and took a breath. "My name is Jalen McCoy. I'm 15, and I didn't come here to make anyone mad. I didn't come here to disrespect anyone." He looked up. "I just told the truth." A few claps, some nods. When I raised my hand that day, I thought we were allowed to ask questions. Isn't that what school's supposed to be about? Learning, challenging ideas? But instead, I got slapped. And people want to argue if it was justified. Like my voice only matters if I say the right thing. But that's not respect. That's fear. Now the gym was quiet. I'm not angry. I'm not bitter. But I want people to think about what it says. That a kid gets hit for speaking facts, and the adults have to debate if that was okay. He stepped back. Applause followed him all the way to his seat. After the forum, Charlene hugged her son tighter than she had in years. "You didn't just stand up," she whispered. "You stood tall." Jalen smiled, finally. A real one. Not just relief. Pride, strength. 2 weeks later, Sheriff Turlington resigned. No press conference, no apology, just a typed letter full of phrases like "distraction from my duties" and "difficult decision." And just like that, he was gone. But something else had taken root in Pine Ridge. Teachers started reworking their history lessons. The school launched a student-led leadership council, with Jalen as one of the first members. And Ms. Burney? She got a promotion. Principal Burney now. But it wasn't the punishment that mattered most. It was the shift, the crack in the silence, the truth refusing to stay quiet. The day the new sheriff was sworn in, Pine Ridge felt different. Not fixed, not perfect, but different. Folks gathered outside the courthouse, some in folding chairs, some leaning against cars. Not for the spectacle, but because they cared. Because something had cracked open in the town's old, polished surface, and now people were actually looking inside. The new sheriff was Donna Marks, a former state investigator with a reputation for fairness and a spine made of steel. First black woman ever to hold the role in that county. Her first statement? Simple. No badge should make a man forget how to treat people, and no child should be afraid to tell the truth. Back at Lincoln High, life didn't go back to normal, because normal wasn't what people wanted anymore. History class got realer. Students talked more, not less. Teachers didn't just teach facts, they asked questions. And the school counselor, Mr. Franklin, started a monthly forum for students to speak on current events. First topic: what does respect really look like? Jalen sat in the front row. He wasn't just a student anymore, he was a reminder. That truth has a cost. That courage can come from the quietest person in the room. That no matter your age, if you see something wrong, you say something. But here's what people didn't see. Jalen still struggled with sleep. He still flinched sometimes when someone raised their voice too fast. And when reporters reached out for interviews, he always asked his mom first. "Am I doing too much?" he asked her one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sky turn orange. Charlene put down her mug. "You didn't do anything wrong, baby. You showed something right. There's a difference." He nodded slowly, letting that sink in. The town gave him a certificate, a ceremony, a scholarship from an alumni fund nobody even knew existed. But none of that mattered as much as one moment. It happened a few weeks later on a random afternoon. A kid named Kenny, quiet, always sat alone, walked up to Jalen after class. He didn't say much, just, "Hey, thanks for that day." Jalen blinked. "For what?" Kenny shrugged. "For speaking up. I didn't know we were allowed to do that." Jalen smiled. "We always were. They just made it feel like we weren't." That stuck. Later, Jalen wrote it down on a sticky note and put it on his bedroom mirror. right next to a picture of Secretary Brookshear shaking his hand. That summer, she came back again, not for the cameras, but for a private visit. Just her and Jalen, walking the hallways of Lincoln High together. "You changed this place," she told him. "I didn't mean to," he said. She laughed. "That's usually how the best change happens." Before she left, she handed him a worn paperback, James Baldwin, dog-eared and underlined. "Keep learning," she said. "Keep questioning. And when the world tells you to shut up, speak louder." He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. And maybe that's the biggest lesson of all. Because the truth is, this story isn't just about a sheriff, or a slap, or a school. It's about power, about fear, about how we treat each other when we think no one's watching, and how fast that changes when someone hits record. It's about the courage it takes to raise your hand when it's easier to keep your head down. It's about the fact that telling the truth, even quietly, even gently, can shake the walls of a building built to silence you. And it's about who claps when that truth gets spoken, and who panics. You might never be in Jalen's shoes, but one day you might see something wrong. And when that moment comes, ask yourself, will I sit quietly or will I speak, even if my voice shakes? Because change doesn't start with noise. It starts with one voice, yours. If you made it this far, then this story meant something to you. So don't let it stop here. Share it. Talk about it. Ask questions. Listen when others speak. And most importantly, support the kids, the truth tellers, the question askers, the ones brave enough to raise their hand. The world needs more of them, and maybe one of them is watching you.